Hello, my fellow YouTubers and subscribers, and welcome to my latest movie review, where today I review The Frighteners, directed by Peter Jackson, released in 1996. So, The Frighteners, yes, this is one of Peter Jackson's earliest films. He made this horror comedy before he did Lord of the Rings. I think this was the last film he made before he made Fellowship of the Ring. And me being a huge Peter Jackson fanboy, I decided to review this film, as I managed to stumble across it when I got this copy. Just to confirm, this is not a VHS. It's just the box is shaped like a VHS. Inside, actually, is the DVD and the Blu-ray. So it's actually quite a nice little collector's set that I picked up. So anyway, The Frighteners. Well, the plot of this movie is as follows. After a tragic car accident that kills his wife, a man discovers he can communicate with the dead to con people. However, when a demonic spirit appears, he may be the only one who can stop it from killing the living and the dead. So that's the essential premise of The Frighteners. So, The Frighteners. Now, as we know, Peter Jackson is a critically acclaimed director. Heck, after this, he would go on to win loads of Oscars. I mean, for Lord of the Rings and for King Kong. And he's still one of the best directors working today, in my opinion. And he is my favourite director, because the Lord of the Rings are my favourite movies of all time. But it's nice to go back and see his earlier work. And I have to say, I enjoyed The Frighteners. I thought it was a good, solid, fun romp of a movie. But I wouldn't say it was perfect. It's certainly not Jackson's best movie ever made, but I certainly think it's definitely one of his quirkiest movies. I do like Peter Jackson's sense of humour about this film, although at times maybe he does pitch it a bit too far. I do think the comedy in this film is a little silly at times, a little over the top, certainly with some of the ghosts who are the supporting cast. And some of the characters, like the FBI agent, he's really over the top. Granted, I did laugh a few times, but at times I thought the reason why it may not work as well as I think it should is because the movie is trying to have a darker, more horrific tone as well. And as you can imagine, the tones kind of conflict, and for me, the tone of this movie never found a consistent thread, and it just felt like it was going from one extreme to the other. The fact that this movie was trying to be a comedy as much as it was trying to be a horror, so it's kind of hard to really ground the story and take elements of it seriously, because there are serious elements to the plot, such as Frank and the backstory surrounding his wife, and there's also the, well, suggested element of domestic abuse with the character of Patricia and her mother. Of course, the truth about Patricia is revealed fairly late in the day, but the movie implies... the movie does delve into some dark and dramatic elements. And like I said, on the flip side, there's that weird humour with all the ghosts, and it doesn't work for me. It just feels like almost two movies in one. It really is a bit strange. But I understand maybe Jackson was going for something a little bit strange, but at the same time, it's got to flow consistently, and for me, it just didn't. However, the cast in this movie are really good. We've got Michael J. Fox, who plays Frank, who's the guy who's the psychic who can talk to ghosts, and he can see the ghosts when nobody else can after the incident of his wife. It's never really explained how he got the ability. I mean, if it was, I obviously missed it, but as far as I'm aware, it wasn't explained. I didn't quite understand how he had the ability to talk to all these ghosts and see them. Presumably because he witnessed his wife's murder. I don't know if that was the reason, but yeah, it was a little confusing to work out why that was. But I still like the concept of that, and I still liked his performance. His character's really good, and I like the fact that they gave him emotional depth. The fact that he's starting to feel guilty. He's starting to feel like he's not a good person, and because he's seeing everybody get murdered, and he doesn't know if he thinks he's to blame for that. So I really like Michael J. Fox's performance, particularly in the interrogation room with the FBI agent, where he's almost breaking down. He feels like it's his fault that they're all dying, and no one's going to believe him when he says that he can talk to ghosts. It's a very interesting angle, and I think Jackson and Fran Walsh, his wife, they wrote a compelling character there. I also like the character of Lucy Linsky, played by Trini Alvarado. I hope I pronounced that right. She's a pretty good character, and yeah, I mean, it's not surprising to see that she falls in love with Frank at the end, but we are introduced to her living with her, well, arsehole husband, Ray, who ends up actually dying early on in the movie and appearing as a ghost, and then he's trying to confront Frank, and then it's through his eyes that we kind of learn more about the perspective of how people are dying, because there's this Reaper character, this Grim Reaper, who's attacking people and killing them, and everybody's got numbers on their heads to signify which number victim they are. And the truth about this is revealed later on. The story is very clear, actually. It's very clear, very simple, very coherent. It makes a lot of sense. And some of the plot revelations I didn't actually expect towards the end. I'm not going to spoil it just in case you haven't watched this movie, but certain revelations regarding Johnny Bartlett and Patricia, that was unexpected. And I like the fact that the film surprised me in that regard. It could have been a very cliche ending, but it was actually a very interesting ending. Especially with the character of Patricia, because we are, under the impression that she's being abused by her mother. But, yeah, whether that is true or not, I'll let you watch the movie to find out. The film moves at a great pace, and it never loses its momentum. And it's only 1 hour 50 minutes, so it doesn't need to be any longer. And I think it actually really works at that length. And I was really engaged throughout. The climax of the film is particularly entertaining when Lucy and Frank have to go and stop, let's say, the Grim Reaper and his assistant, lol. It's a pretty entertaining scene where they're going through the old hospital, and then Frank is having the visions of the past when he's seeing the hospital when it was fully built and not destroyed, and it's giving him clues as to get to the chapel and everything, because they have to go and stop the villains, quote unquote, not trying to give anything away. I think the film is solidly directed. I think Peter Jackson definitely uses his knowledge of horror movies, because he's made other horror films before this. So he's obviously he made a few low budget ones. So he's obviously using some of that knowledge and experience to his advantage. We see a lot of digital effects in this movie, and I think for the time, because this was released in the 90s, the visual effects era, the era of digital effects, was just coming into fruition. And I think that this movie is a good example of how they utilized it really well. I mean, looking at it now, yes, it's dated, but for the time, Peter Jackson and his team managed to get a good amount of digital effects that were pretty freaky. I mean, if you watch this in lower quality, it probably would be a bit more scary, but watching it on Blu-ray, you do notice that it is dated and it looks kind of, blocky and CGI. It's obvious, basically. And I think the cinematography is really good for this film. It looks pretty scary, and some of the camera angles are really interesting. Again, Jackson is a very experienced horror filmmaker. It's definitely his favorite genre. You can tell he loves the horror genre. But the movie at least kept itself on a good narrative. It didn't lose its momentum with the story. It was a very intriguing story, and the ending actually packed a little bit of an emotional punch, which was nice. I appreciate that. The fact that Frank got to kind of sort of reunite with his wife at the end. No spoilers. Well, it's kind of spoilers. And so much of the movie is about Frank trying to let go of his wife's death and trying to live the rest of his life. And of course, he chooses to do that with Lucy, which is kind of nice. And I like the fact that Lucy and Frank are kind of mirrored characters in that respect. They both lose partners, and then it kind of both brings them together in a weird way. It's kind of weird, but I like the parallels there, and I think the script was clever in that regard. So overall, I really enjoyed The Frighteners. I thought it was good fun. The comedy's a little bit zany, a bit wacky at times. There's definitely a weird sensibility about this film. Part of that works, but some of it doesn't. Again, for me, it's the tone of this movie that's really inconsistent. And I think Jackson and co should have kind of pulled back on some of the elements. I think at 1 minute it's being very extremely dark and violent and dramatic, and then the next minute it's being really overly zany and goofy in the next minute. So it does feel a bit like two different movies. But aside from that, I enjoyed this movie, so I'm going to give The Frighteners an 8 out of 10. Yeah, it surprised me in a lot of areas. I didn't expect it to be this good, actually. I'm impressed with it. But it's definitely not Jackson's best movie, as we know. Obviously, his later works would go on to win Academy Awards, so there's no question that the guy would improve later on. But I really enjoyed watching one of his earlier works, I must admit. I really enjoyed The Frighteners, and I'm definitely going to add it to my playlist of Peter Jackson movie reviews. So yeah, that's my review of The Frighteners. What do you think of this movie? Please comment down below, let me know. I will review more Peter Jackson movies in the future. Of the ones I haven't seen, I think I've got The Lovely Bones, Brain Dead, Meet the Feebles, a few others left to review. And I believe he's done a couple of documentary movies as well, which maybe I will look at as well. So rest assured, I will be back to talk about Peter Jackson in the future. But anyway, thank you very much all for watching this review. Please hit the subscribe button for future content and stay tuned for more movie reviews in the future. So until next time, I'm Mr. Tarnus11. Thank you for watching. See ya. Bye for now.